The Andorian envoy's head exploded in a shower of blue gore, brain matter splattering the Earth Senate Hall's pristine marble floors. In the stunned silence that followed, only the sizzling of the Tholian's assassin's plasma rifle and the dying envoy's death gurgles could be heard. On the Andorian colony world of Theros, cities burned. Tholian's death squads rampaged through the streets, mercilessly executing any Andorian they found. The once proud Andorian race faced extinction at the hands of the ruthless Tholian's empire. In desperation, the Andorian High Council had sent envoy Nezo to Earth, seeking aid from the only race that might have the strength and audacity to oppose the Tholians, humans. But with Nezo's assassination, broadcast live across Earth's global media net, humanity's response hung in the balance. General Graves, his hawkish features twisted with rage, rose to his feet in the Senate Hall. "This insult cannot stand," he bellowed. "The Tholians have spat in the face of diplomacy. We must respond with force, or risk inviting their aggression upon our own worlds." Pacifist Senator Roth shook her head. "We cannot be dragged into another war. The wounds of our last conflicts are still raw. Let the Andorians fight their own battles." As the Senate descended into heated arguments, Adam Sullivan, a battle-scarred veteran seeking redemption, stood tall. "If we allow the Tholians to slaughter the Andorians unopposed, their conquest will not stop at Theros," Sullivan declared, his voice booming through the chaos. "Earth could be next." Slowly the Senate quieted, all eyes turning to Sullivan. Seizing the moment, he continued, "I will lead an elite force, the Ares Brigade, to Theros. We will stand with the Andorians, face the Tholians head-on, and show them the consequences of angering humanity." Swayed by Sullivan's impassioned plea and galvanized by Nezo's brutal murder, Earth's leaders were moved to action. The Ares Brigade was authorized, and Sullivan found himself racing across the stars to war-torn Theros, where an uneasy alliance with the Andorians and the galaxy's fate awaited. But as the Ares Brigade made planetfall, they quickly discovered that the pacifistic Andorians possessed advanced biotech that far surpassed Earth's capabilities. To stand a chance against the Tholians, Sullivan would have to train the Andorians to fight, while his own warriors unlocked the secrets of the alien tech. It was a precarious balancing act, one that threatened to unravel at any moment. If Sullivan failed, two races would burn, and the Tholians' genocidal ambitions would be one step closer to Earth's doorstep. As the Ares Brigade settled into their new base on Theros, Captain Adam Sullivan wasted no time in assigning tasks to his team. He called Lieutenant Jarrett Hawkins into his makeshift office, a determined look etched on his battle-hardened face. "Hawkins, I need you to work with the Andorians on integrating their biotech with our weaponry," Sullivan ordered. "We need every advantage we can get against the Tholians." Hawkins, a brash and impulsive young officer, smirked. "With all due respect, sir, I don't see how their primitive tech could possibly improve our state-of-the-art gear." Sullivan fixed him with a stern gaze. "That's an order, Lieutenant. The Andorians' biotech is far more advanced than it appears. Underestimate it at your peril." Hawkins saluted, his eyebrows furrowed. "Yes, sir." The lieutenant made his way to the Andorian research facility, where he was greeted by Zara, a brilliant young scientist with piercing blue eyes and an air of quiet intensity. She regarded Hawkins coolly as he approached. "I am here to assist with the integration of our technologies," Hawkins said stiffly. Zara raised an eyebrow. "Assist or interfere?" Hawkins bristled. "Look, I'm just following orders. The sooner we get this done, the better." As they began to work, it became clear that the Andorian biotech was indeed far more sophisticated than Hawkins had assumed. The organic components, grown rather than manufactured, possessed capabilities that left him awestruck. However, integrating them with the human weaponry proved to be a daunting challenge. Hours turned into days as Hawkins and Zara labored over the problem, often butting heads due to their vastly different approaches and philosophies. Hawkins favored brute force and straightforward solutions, while Zara advocated for elegance and harmony. "You can't just jam our tech into your crude weapons," Zara snapped, her frustration boiling over. "The living components must be carefully nurtured and adapted." Hawkins smacked his palm on the workbench. We don't have time for your delicate sensibilities. The Tholians won't wait for us to perfect our designs. Just as their argument threatened to escalate into a shouting match, an alarm blared through the facility. Hawkins and Zara rushed to the main display, their eyes widening in horror at what they saw. The Tholians were constructing a colossal superweapon, a planet killer capable of obliterating entire worlds. The weapon, nearing completion, was being fueled by a rare, unstable element found only on Theros. Hawkins and Zara exchanged a grave look, their differences momentarily forgotten in the face of this terrifying revelation. They knew they had to work together to find a way to stop the Tholians before it was too late. Meanwhile, Sullivan met with Andorian High Counselor Tarnus, seeking to understand the pacifistic culture of the Andorians and find ways to train them for combat without violating their core beliefs. The two leaders walked through the Andorian capital, its once peaceful streets now filled with the hustle and bustle of war preparations. Our biotech was always meant for healing and growth, never destruction, Tarnus explained, his voice heavy with sorrow. To see it weaponized goes against everything we believe in. Sullivan nodded, his eyes filled with empathy. I understand, Counselor, but your people face extinction if we don't find a way to defend against the Tholians. Tarnus sighed deeply. I know. It is a bitter pill to swallow, but one we must endure if we hope to survive. As they continued their somber walk, Sullivan's mind raced with the challenges ahead. He knew that forging the Andorians into a fighting force would be a monumental task, one that would test the limits of his leadership and the commitment of his own battle-weary soldiers. And with the news of the Tholian superweapon, the stakes had just become unimaginably higher. The fate of not just Theros, but countless worlds now hung in the balance. Back at the research facility, Hawkins and Zara worked with a newfound sense of urgency and unity. They pored over schematics and simulations, searching for any weakness in the Tholians' designs that could be exploited. There, Zara said, pointing to a pulsing red dot on the holographic display. The reactor core. If we can disrupt it during the final stages of the weapon's power-up sequence, the whole thing should destabilize and implode. Hawkins studied the readout, his brow furrowed. But the core is deep within the most heavily guarded section of the base. We'd never be able to fight our way in. A determined glint shone in Zara's eyes. Then we don't fight, we infiltrate. As they began to formulate a plan for a covert sabotage mission, Hawkins couldn't help but feel a grudging respect for the Andorian scientist. She was brilliant, tenacious, and braver than he had initially given her credit for. Perhaps, he thought, there was more to these aliens than he had assumed. And perhaps, working together, they just might have a chance to stop the Tholians and their terrible weapon before it was too late. But even as hope flickered in his heart, Hawkins knew that the hardest battles were still to come. The Tholians would not give up their prize easily, and the Ares Brigade would be tested as never before. The fate of worlds hung in the balance, and failure was not an option. Hawkins and Zara crouched behind a twisted mass of alien metal, their hearts pounding in their ears. The Tholian stronghold loomed before them, a nightmarish fusion of crystalline structures and pulsing organic matter. Ready? Hawkins whispered, his hand hovering over the biocamouflage device Zara had engineered. She nodded, her blue skin shimmering with nervous energy. Now or never. Hawkins activated the device and their forms shimmered, blending seamlessly with their surroundings. They moved swiftly through the outer perimeter, Zara's intimate knowledge of Andorian biotech allowing them to slip past living security systems that would have vaporized any normal intruder. As they penetrated deeper into the complex, the true scale of the Tholian superweapon became apparent. Massive energy conduits pulsed with hardly restrained power, feeding into a central spire that seemed to stretch endlessly upward. By the stars, Zara breathed, her eyes wide. This could destroy entire systems. Hawkins gritted his teeth. Not if we have anything to say about it. They made their way towards the control room, ducking into shadows whenever Tholian patrols passed. Just as they reached the final corridor, a booming voice echoed through the chamber. Intruders! You dare violate the sanctity of Tholian might? Commander Zorg stepped into view, his crystalline body augmented with vicious-looking cybernetics. His faceted eyes glowed with malevolent intelligence. Hawkins raised his weapon, but Zorg was faster. A burst of energy slammed into the human, sending him flying into a nearby console. He crumpled to the ground, blood seeping from a ghastly wound in his side. Zara cried out, torn between rushing to Hawkins's aid and facing the advancing Tholian commander. In that moment of desperation, she felt something awaken within her, a primal connection to the very essence of Andorian biotech. Energy surged through her body, guided by instinct and sheer force of will. She thrust her hands forward, channeling a torrent of bioelectric energy directly into Zorg's cybernetic implants. The Tholian commander convulsed, his crystalline form crackling with overloaded energy. With a final, ear-splitting shriek, he exploded into a shower of crystalline shards. Zara rushed to Hawkins, her hands glowing with healing energy. "Stay with me," she pleaded, pouring her newly discovered power into his broken body. Hawkins's eyes fluttered open, meeting Zara's gaze. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them, a newfound respect, understanding, and perhaps something more. "We need to move," Hawkins grunted, struggling to his feet. "The weapon—" "There!" Zara pointed to a pulsing data core in the center of the control room. "That must be the key to shutting it down." They limped towards the core, Hawkins providing cover fire as Tholian reinforcements poured into the chamber. With a final burst of effort, they wrenched the core free and activated their emergency extraction beacons. As they materialized back on Theros, alarms blared throughout the colony. Sullivan burst into the command center, his face grim. "We've got a problem," he announced. "A massive Tholian fleet just entered the system. They're here for revenge." Hawkins handed over the data core. "We've got bigger problems than that, sir. The weapon they're building, it's like nothing we've ever seen before." Sullivan's face hardened. He turned to Dr. Vance, who had been poring over the stolen data. "Options?" Vance's eyes lit up with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. "We might have a chance. If we can use this data to engineer a bioweapon targeting Tholian physiology, we could incapacitate their entire fleet without bloodshed." The Andorian High Council, gathered in emergency session, recoiled at the suggestion. "Weaponize our life-giving technology?" one counselor sputtered. "It goes against everything we believe in." Sullivan stepped forward, his voice low and intense. "I understand your reservations, but right now it's either this or annihilation. We're out of time and options." As the council deliberated, the first Tholian ships entered orbit. The colony held its breath, caught between extinction and compromise. Finally, the High Council gave its reluctant assent. Vance and his team worked feverishly, combining Andorian biotech with the stolen Tholian data. As the Tholian fleet moved into attack formation, Sullivan gave the order. The bioweapon deployed, an invisible wave washing over the Tholian armada. Ship after ship went dark, drifting aimlessly in space as their crews succumbed to the tailored pathogen. For a moment it seemed victory was at hand. Then a massive dreadnought winked into existence, a behemoth that had somehow avoided the bioweapon's effects. "This is Admiral Cragg of the Tholian Empire," a chilling voice broadcast across all frequencies. "You have defied us for the last time. Theros will burn as an example to all who oppose Tholian dominion." The dreadnought's weapons began to glow with building energy, impervious to the bioweapon that had felled the rest of the fleet. Sullivan, Hawkins, and Zara exchanged grim looks, knowing that their next move would determine the fate of an entire world. The dreadnoug's weapon systems pulsed with an eerie green glow, growing brighter by the second. Alarms blared throughout the Theros colony as civilians rushed to shelters. Sullivan barked orders, his face grim. "Hawkins, what have we got?" The lieutenant's fingers flew over tactical displays. "Sir, our weapons can't penetrate those shields. We're sitting ducks." Dr. Vance shook his head. "Even with the Andorian biotech, we don't have anything that can touch it." Sullivan's eyes landed on Zara, who stood frozen, staring at the looming dreadnought. "Zara," he said, his voice cutting through her trance, "is there any way to boost an EMP using your biotech? Something that could get through those shields?" Zara's antennae twitched as her mind raced. It's possible, but it would require pushing our technology beyond anything we've ever attempted. The risks are less than certain annihilation, Sullivan finished. He placed a hand on her shoulder. I know I'm asking the impossible, but it's our only shot. Zara looked at Hawkins, saw the desperation in his eyes. She nodded. I'll need Dr. Vance and your best engineers. Done, Sullivan said. He turned to Hawkins. Lieutenant, prep a strike team. If we get a window, you'll need to deploy whatever Zara cooks up. As Zara and the science team worked feverishly, Sullivan assembled a task force of the colony's remaining ships. We'll draw their fire, he explained. Give Hawkins the distraction he needs. The dreadnought's weapons reached full charge. Admiral Cragg's voice boomed once more. Your feeble defenses cannot save you. Witness the... Sullivan cut the transmission. All ships, engage. A swarm of human and Andorian vessels surged toward the Titanic Tholian ship. Energy beams lanced out, barely deflected by the defenders' shields. Sullivan's flagship took a glancing hit, rocking violently. In the lab, Zara manipulated strands of living circuitry, her hands steady despite the chaos. Almost there, Hawkins burst in. We're out of time! Zara nodded, carefully placing the pulsing bioconstruct into a containment field. It's as ready as it'll ever be. You'll have one shot. Hawkins's team raced to their assault shuttle. As they launched, Sullivan's voice crackled over the comms. We've got their attention. Make it count. The shuttle weaved through the debris-strewn battlefield. A stray shot clipped their wing, sending them spinning. Hawkins gritted his teeth, wrestling the controls. Hang on! They slammed into the dreadnought's hull, magnetic grapples barely holding. Hawkins led his team out, the void of space held at bay by personal force fields. They scrambled across the crystalline surface, dodging point defense fire. There! Hawkins shouted, gesturing to a pulsing node. Plant it! As his team set the charges, a massive explosion rocked the dreadnought. Hawkins watched in horror as Sullivan's flagship, trailing fire and debris, plowed into the Tholian vessel. Captain! Hawkins screamed. The comms crackled. Sullivan's voice, weak but determined. Finish the job, Lieutenant. That's an order. Hawkins swallowed hard, blinking away tears that threatened to form. Charges set! Everyone clear! They leapt away just as Zara's creation detonated. A wave of scintillating energy washed over the dreadnought. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, like a string of dying stars, the Tholian ship's systems began to wink out. It worked, Zara breathed, watching from the colony's command center. Hawkins wasted no time. All units, board that ship. We're taking the fight to them. The next hours were a blur of close-quarters combat. Humans and Andorians fought side by side, pushing deeper into the alien vessel. Hawkins led from the front, his willpower fueled by the memory of Sullivan's sacrifice. They reached the bridge where Admiral Cragg awaited. The Tholian's crystalline form bristled with lethal energy. You dare? He snarled. Hawkins raised his weapon. It's over, Cragg. Surrender. Never, Cragg lashed out, a wave of destructive force sending Hawkins's team flying. As Cragg advanced, murder in his alien eyes, a familiar voice rang out. Now! Zara burst onto the bridge, her hands outstretched. Tendrils of bioenergy snaked from her fingertips, enveloping Cragg and his remaining crew. The Tholians writhed, their crystalline forms clouding over as Zara's improvised bioweapon took hold. In moments, it was done. Cragg and his bridge crew lay incapacitated, their threat neutralized. Hawkins stared at Zara in awe. How did you... She gave a tired smile. I had a hunch about Tholian physiology. Looks like it paid off. As the adrenaline faded, the weight of their victory, and its cost, settled in. Hawkins looked out the viewport at the scarred surface of Theros, the scattered wreckage of friend and foe alike. What now, Lieutenant? One of his soldiers asked. Hawkins squared his shoulders, feeling the mantle of command settle upon him. Now, he said, his voice steady, We prepare for what comes next. Hawkins surveyed the captured Tholian dreadnought's bridge, his mind racing with the implications of their victory. Admiral Cragg lay subdued in a corner, crystalline form dulled by Zara's bioweapon. The lieutenant's comm unit chirped urgently. "Hawkins here," he answered, voice taut with exhaustion. "Sir, we need you planetside immediately," came the reply. "The Andorian High Council is convening an emergency session." Within the hour, Hawkins stood before the assembled council members, their antennae twitching with nervous energy. He outlined the situation succinctly, pulling no punches about the precarious nature of their position. "We've won a battle, but the Tholian Empire remains a grave threat," Hawkins explained, calling up a holographic star map. Intel from Cragg points to these locations as their primary staging areas and shipyards. Zara leaned forward, studying the glowing points. "You're proposing preemptive strikes?" Hawkins nodded grimly. "We can't afford to let them regroup. Hit-and-run raids, targeting production and logistics, cripple their ability to mass forces near Theros." Murmurs of unease rippled through the council. An elder Andorian rose, his voice quavering. "This risks further escalation. Have we not seen enough bloodshed?" "With respect," Hawkins countered, "the bloodshed has only begun if we don't act now." Debate raged for hours, but in the end, Hawkins's plan won grudging approval. Within days, a joint human-Andorian strike force deployed, melding Ares Brigade tactics with cutting-edge Andorian technology. Their first target, a sprawling Tholian shipyard orbiting a dying star. Hawkins led from the front, his stealth shuttle weaving through a stellar debris field. As they approached, the magnitude of the Tholian war machine became apparent. Half-constructed dreadnoughts and swarms of fighter craft filled the sky. "All units, execute on my mark," Hawkins sub-vocalized into his neural link. 3, 2, 1, mark. Chaos erupted as cloaked human vessels suddenly materialized, unleashing salvos of Andorian-enhanced weaponry. Production gantries shattered, escort ships exploded in silent bursts of light and crystal. Hawkins' team boarded the central control nexus, fighting their way through corridors of living crystal. Victory came swiftly, but at a cost. As they limped back to Theros, Hawkins stared at the list of casualties, each name searing itself into his memory. The pattern repeated across a dozen systems. The Ares Brigade struck hard and fast, vanishing before Tholian reinforcements could respond. But with each raid, the enemy adapted, their defenses growing stronger. Hawkins knew they were on borrowed time. Then came the news that changed everything. "Sir!" A junior officer burst into the war room, face pale. "We've lost contact with Ramirez's team. Last transmission indicated they were under heavy fire near the Tholian frontier base." Hawkins's blood ran cold. "Zara?" "She was with them, sir, providing biotech support." The room fell silent as the implication sank in. If Zara fell into Tholian hands, with her intimate knowledge of the bioweapon that had turned the tide. Hawkins's teeth clenched. He turned to his command staff, voice steady despite the turmoil within. "Prep our best extraction team. We're getting them back." As alarms sounded and troops mobilized, Hawkins allowed himself a moment of grim reflection. The real test of his leadership was about to begin. Hawkins's fist slammed onto the console, cracking the display. "Damn it," he growled, the loss of contact with Ramirez's team echoing in his mind. His eyes locked onto the last known coordinates, a desolate region near the Tholian frontier. "Sir, what are your orders?" asked his second-in-command, tension evident in her voice. Hawkins straightened, pushing aside his personal anguish. "Assemble our best extraction team. We move out in 30 minutes. As the war room erupted into action, Hawkins retreated to his quarters. He activated a secure channel to Dr. Vance, back on Theros. "Lieutenant," Vance's holographic form flickered to life. "I've been analyzing the data from our last encounter with the Tholians. There's something you need to know." Hawkins leaned in, listening intently as Vance detailed his findings. The doctor's words painted a grim picture. The Tholians had reverse-engineered elements of the bioweapon used against their dreadnought. "They're developing countermeasures," Vance concluded, Your standard gear won't be enough. Hawkins nodded grimly. Can you get us something that will work? I'm already on it. I'll have prototypes ready by the time you reach the rendezvous point. The extraction team assembled in the hangar bay, a mix of hardened veterans and newer recruits. Hawkins addressed them, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions beneath the surface. Our mission is clear. Locate and retrieve Ramirez's team, with special priority on securing Zara. Intel suggests they're being held at a secret Tholian base. Expect heavy resistance and be prepared for anything. As they boarded the stealth dropships, Hawkins felt the weight of command press down on him. The lives of his team, the fate of Zara and the others, it all rested on his shoulders. The journey to the Tholian frontier was tense and silent. Hawkins studied the intel gleaned from Admiral Cragg's interrogation, searching for any advantage they could use. As they approached the coordinates of the Tholian base, the dropship's sensors picked up an anomaly. A massive structure materialized before them, shimmering into existence as if emerging from a mirage. Cloaking technology, Hawkins muttered. They're learning. The element of surprise lost, Hawkins gave the order to engage. The dropship screamed towards the base, weaving through a hail of crystal shards launched by Tholian defense batteries. They breached the outer perimeter, boots hitting the ground as Tholian soldiers swarmed to meet them. The air crackled with energy weapons fire, and the screech of crystals shattering. Hawkins led the charge, his team pushing deeper into the base. They encountered pockets of fierce resistance, Tholian warriors wielding strange, pulsing weapons that seemed to disrupt their own biotech enhancements. Vance was right, Hawkins growled, watching one of his soldiers stumble as his augmented reflexes failed. Fall back to defensive positions. They retreated to a makeshift stronghold, the Tholians pressing their advantage. Hawkins surveyed his team, noting the mounting casualties and dwindling supplies. His comm unit crackled to life. This is Captain Ramirez. Does anyone copy? Hawkins's heart leapt. Ramirez, what's your status? Alive, barely. We're in a holding cell, level 3. Zara's here, but she's in bad shape. The Tholians, they've been experimenting on her. Fury coursed through Hawkins' veins. Hold tight. We're coming for you. He turned to his team, purpose etched on his face. We need to push through. Ramirez and the others are counting on us. As they prepared to mount another assault, alarms blared throughout the base. A familiar voice, distorted but unmistakable, echoed through the corridors. This is Commander Shraka. Intruders have breached our defenses. Activate Protocol Omega. Prepare the weapon. Hawkins's blood ran cold. Whatever Shraka had planned, they were out of time. All units, push forward, he ordered. We end this now. They surged ahead, fighting with renewed vigor. But as they neared the detention level, a massive blast door sealed shut before them. Hawkins stared at the impenetrable barrier, frustration mounting. They were so close, yet Zara and the others remained just out of reach. Suddenly, his comm unit lit up with an incoming transmission. Lieutenant Hawkins, this is Captain Ramirez. Reinforcements have arrived. Lieutenant Hawkins, this is Captain Ramirez. Reinforcements have arrived. Hawkins' eyes widened as he processed Ramirez's words. Through the chaos of battle, he hadn't noticed the telltale rumble of incoming ships. Sit rep, Captain, Hawkins demanded, ducking as a Tholian energy blast scorched the wall above him. It's Dr. Vance, sir. He's here with a team and some new tech. Says it's our best shot at cracking that door. Hope surged through Hawkins. Get them here ASAP. We'll hold this position. Minutes later, Vance and his team arrived, carrying strange, pulsing devices. The doctor's face was grim as he approached Hawkins. Lieutenant, I've developed a countermeasure to the Tholians' new weapons, Vance explained, his voice barely audible over the firefight. But there's more. We've uncovered intel about their superweapons program. It's worse than we thought. As Vance's team worked to breach the blast door, the doctor outlined the Tholians' plans. Hawkins listened, his expression hardening with each revelation. We can't let them complete those weapons, Hawkins growled. We need to strike now, before it's too late. The blast door groaned, then collapsed inward. Hawkins led the charge into the detention block, his mind already formulating a plan. They found Zara and the others, battered but alive. As medics tended to the wounded, Hawkins pulled Ramirez aside. "Captain, I need you to gather every scrap of intel from the prisoners here. Anything about weapons facilities, research stations, assembly plants. We're going to hit them where it hurts." Ramirez nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Back on Theros, Hawkins stood before a holographic map of Tholian space, outlining his audacious plan to the assembled human and Andorian leaders. 3 targets, he explained, highlighting key locations. A bioweapons lab, a munitions depot, and their primary assembly complex. We hit them all simultaneously. We can set their program back years. Murmurs of concern rippled through the room. An Andorian general spoke up. "This is beyond risky, Lieutenant. Our forces are already stretched thin." Hawkins met the general's gaze. "The risk of inaction is far greater. If we don't stop them now, there won't be a galaxy left to defend." After hours of debate, the plan was approved. Hawkins assigned his best officers to lead the other 2 strikes, the impulsive Sergeant Keller for the bioweapons lab, and the level-headed Captain Ramirez for the munitions depot. As preparations were made, Zara approached Hawkins. Her face still bore the marks of her captivity, but her eyes burned with drive. "I'm coming with you," she stated, her tone leaving no room for argument. Hawkins knew better than to refuse. He simply nodded, grateful for her expertise and support. The night before the operation, Hawkins stood alone on a balcony overlooking the Theros capital. The weight of what was to come pressed down on him. Countless lives hung in the balance, and the hope of the universe rested on the success of their mission. As dawn broke, the strike teams assembled. Hawkins addressed them one final time, his words etched with the gravity of their task. "What we do today will echo through history," he said, his voice carrying across the hangar. "Not just for humanity, not just for the Andorians, but for every sentient being in this galaxy. We are the line in the sand. We are the shield that protects the innocent from annihilation. Today, we fight not just for victory, but for survival itself." With a final salute, the teams boarded their ships. As Hawkins settled into the pilot's seat of his stealth craft, Zara beside him, he allowed himself a moment of grim reflection. Whatever the outcome, the next few hours would change the course of the war, and perhaps the future of the cosmos itself. The engines roared to life, and the strike force lifted off, vanishing into the star-studded void of space, their destination, the heart of Tholian power, and a confrontation that would determine the future of all known life. The explosion rocked the command center, knocking Zara off her feet. As she struggled to stand, the bitter taste of defeat filled her mouth. Lieutenant Hawkins was gone, his sacrifice buying them time, but at a terrible cost. Alarms blared as reports flooded in. The Tholian fleet, led by Warlord Gortak, had arrived in force. Theros trembled under the weight of their approach. "We can't withstand a full-scale assault," Captain Ramirez growled, his face illuminated by the flashing red emergency lights. Zara's mind raced. They needed an advantage, something unexpected. Her eyes fell on the schematics of the captured Tholian ordnance. "The mines," she breathed. "We can use their own weapons against them." She outlined her plan to the Andorian Council, her words rapid-fire and urgent. It was audacious, perhaps even foolhardy, but they were out of options. Hours later, Zara stood in the control room, watching as the trap was sprung. The Tholian fleet approached, a swarm of crystalline death. Then chaos erupted. Biotech mines, guided by a cobbled-together network of human and Andorian tech, detonated in synchronized fury. The void of space lit up with the deaths of Tholian ships, their hulls shattering like glass. "Half the fleet," an officer reported, awe in his voice. "We've taken out half their ships." But there was no time to celebrate. Gortak, enraged by the ambush, launched his ground assault with savage intensity. The colony's defenses held at first. Zara's biotech enhancements gave the Andorian soldiers an edge, their reflexes and strength augmented beyond normal limits. But then Gortak unleashed his secret weapon. They came like a tide of madness. Tholian berserkers, Their minds and bodies, twisted by chemical enhancements, crashed against the defensive lines. They felt no pain, no fear, only an all-consuming rage. "Fall back!" Ramirez shouted as another position was overrun. "We can't hold them!" In the labs beneath the colony, Dr. Vance worked feverishly. Sweat beaded on his brow as he manipulated gene sequences and molecular structures. "It's ready," he announced, holding up a vial of swirling liquid. "But we need to get it into their command node." Ramirez's Rangers, their armor scorched and dented, volunteered for the suicide mission. Zara watched them go, knowing many wouldn't return. The battle raged on, a symphony of destruction. Then, without warning, the world turned white. The ancient Andorian temple, long thought abandoned, erupted in a pillar of fire. Gortak's superweapon, hidden in plain sight, detonated with catastrophic force. As the dust settled, Zara surveyed the devastation. Half the colony lay in ruins, its defenders scattered and broken. But in the ashes of defeat, she saw a glimmer of hope. "We need to combine everything," she said, her voice hoarse from the acrid smoke. "Human, Andorian, Tholian, all of it." They worked through the night, melding disparate technologies into something new. Biosynthetic matrices intertwined with robotic components, pulsing with stolen Tholian energy. Dawn broke as Gortak's forces massed for the final push, but rising to meet them was something they couldn't have imagined. It towered over the battlefield, a colossus of flesh and metal and crystal. In its core, Zara felt the merged consciousness of human, Andorian, and repurposed Tholian tech. The hybrid construct moved with impossible grace, its weapons systems obliterating Tholian units with surgical precision. Gortak, his strategic genius faltering in the face of this unprecedented threat, ordered an all-out attack. It was his final mistake. The counterattack was swift and merciless. Tholian forces crumbled before the onslaught, their weapons useless against the adaptive defenses of the hybrid. As the last echoes of battle faded, Zara found herself staring at a solitary figure. Warlord Gortak, stripped of his armies and his arrogance, stood alone amidst the wreckage of his invasion force. With his capture, the immediate threat to Theros was over. But as Zara looked out over the scarred landscape of the colony, she knew this was just the beginning. The fusion of their technologies had created something greater than the sum of its parts, and with it, the chance to take the fight to the heart of the Tholian Empire itself. The hybrid construct's victory over Gortak's forces had barely settled when Zara and Captain Ramirez huddled over holographic maps, their faces illuminated by the flickering blue light of strategic projections. "We can't give them time to regroup," Zara said, her eyes scanning the intricate web of Tholian strongholds. "We need to strike now, while they are in disarray." Ramirez nodded, his fingers tracing paths between key targets. "Corda Prime, Zalkan, and Zirion. Hit them all at once and we could cripple their entire war machine." As they refined their audacious plan, Dr. Vance burst into the room, his lab coat stained with various fluids. "I've done it," he announced, his eyes wild with excitement. "We can adapt the hybrid technology into a mobile assault platform, a dreadnought unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen." Over the next few days, the Alliance's shipyards hummed with frantic activity. The massive biosynthetic dreadnought took shape, its hull pulsing with veins of energy. Zara stood on the command bridge, feeling the ship's artificial synapses connecting with her own enhanced nervous system. "All systems online," a technician reported. "The dreadnought is ready." Ramirez's voice crackled over the comms. "Strike teams are in position. We're go for launch." The joint human-Andorian battle group surged forward, exit vectors burning bright against the void of space. At its heart, Zara's dreadnought led the charge, its massive form dwarfing even the largest Alliance cruisers. They dropped out of FTL in a coordinated assault, appearing simultaneously above Corda Prime, Zalkan, and Zirion. The Tholian defenders, caught completely off guard, scrambled to mount a response. On Corda Prime, Ramirez's Rangers breached the orbital shipyards. Their specialized gear allowed them to move through the crystalline structures with eerie silence. As they planted Andorian Vaero-adaptive charges on half-constructed Tholian vessels, the Dreadnought's weapons tore through the orbital defenses above. Zalkan's bioweapon facilities erupted in chaos as Vance's neurological disruptors activated. Tholian researchers collapsed, their minds overloaded by the invisible assault. Elite shock troopers swarmed the compounds, incinerating viral stockpiles with precision plasma bursts. But it was on Zirion where the true fury of the Alliance's attack was unleashed. The Dreadnought descended through the atmosphere, its hull glowing red-hot. Zara felt every impact, every strain on the ship's systems, as if they were extensions of her own body. "Mutagenic payload armed," she announced, her voice steady despite the maelstrom of battle around her. "Targeting Tholian garrison concentrations." The weapons fired, and Zara watched through the Dreadnought's sensors as entire battalions of Tholian troops simply melted. The crystalline beings liquefied, their once fearsome forms reduced to inert puddles. Human armored columns surged forward, exploiting the gaps in the Tholian defenses. They seized control centers and communication hubs, effectively decapitating the Tholian command structure. As the battles raged across 3 sectors, intercepted Tholian transmissions painted a picture of growing panic within the Empire. But one voice cut through the chaos, a calm, calculating presence that sent a chill down Zara's spine. "This is High Strategist Vrak," the voice declared. "All available forces converge on these coordinates. We will crush this pitiful Alliance offensive in one decisive stroke." Zara's mind raced, processing the tactical implications. If Vrak manages to concentrate his reserves, we could lose everything we've gained, she realized aloud. She made her decision in an instant. "Divert all power to engines and weapons," she ordered. "We're going after Vrak's fleet." The Dreadnought's core temperature spiked as Zara pushed it beyond its design limits. Warning klaxons blared, but she ignored them, her focus entirely on the looming confrontation. As they hurtled towards Vrak's assembling armada, Zara felt the ship's systems begin to fail. The hybrid technology, pushed beyond its tolerances, was starting to break down. But it was too late to turn back now. Vrak's fleet lay before them, a filled array of Tholian warships ready to reverse the Alliance's hard-won gains. Zara took a deep breath, feeling the Dreadnought's immense power coursing through her enhanced body. She knew what had to be done. "All hands, prepare for final assault," she announced, her voice echoing through the dying ship. "We end this now." The Dreadnought's hull groaned as Zara pushed it beyond its limits, hurtling towards Vrak's assembled fleet. Alarms blared, warning of imminent system failures. But she ignored them. There was no turning back now. "All hands, prepare for final assault," she announced, her voice echoing through the dying ship. "We end this now." The Dreadnought's weapons blazed, tearing through the first wave of Tholian ships. Zara felt each impact, each explosion, as if they were happening within her own body. The hybrid technology, pushed beyond its tolerances, began to break down. In a blinding flash of light, the Dreadnought's core went critical. Zara's last conscious thought was a mixture of triumph and regret as the shockwave obliterated Vrak's fleet and her own vessel alike. In the aftermath of Zara's cataclysmic sacrifice, an eerie silence fell over the battlefields. Captain Ramirez stood on the bridge of his command ship, staring at the swirling debris field where the Dreadnought had been moments before. "Status report," he barked, his voice hoarse. An officer responded, "Sir, Vrak's counterattack has been neutralized. The Tholian fleet is in full retreat across all sectors." Ramirez nodded grimly. "And our forces?" "We've suffered heavy losses, but—" The officer paused, swallowing hard. "We've achieved total victory, sir." The words should have filled Ramirez with elation. Instead, a cold dread settled in the pit of his stomach. Days later, Ramirez found himself on the surface of Zirion, surveying the devastation wrought by their victory. The acrid smell of decay filled his nostrils as he picked his way through the ruins of what had once been a thriving Tholian city. Dr. Vance approached, his face ashen. "Captain, I've completed my analysis of the environment." Ramirez braced himself. "Give it to me straight, Doc." Vance's eyes were haunted as he spoke. The mutagenic weapons we unleashed, they've contaminated everything. The bioneural agents are consuming all biological systems. This planet will be uninhabitable for centuries. Ramirez's fists clenched at his sides. And the civilian population? Vance could only shake his head. Similar reports flooded in from Zalkan and Corda Prime. Cities reduced to toxic sludge. Orbital bombardments that killed indiscriminately. The true cost of their victory became painfully clear. Dissent spread through the ranks like wildfire. Ramirez overheard heated arguments between soldiers, some defending their actions as necessary for survival, others horrified by the scale of destruction they'd unleashed. The captain's own doubts gnawed at him as he led a patrol through the ruins of a Tholian reactor complex on Zalkan's barren moon. It was there they stumbled upon something unexpected, a group of human soldiers tending to wounded Tholian prisoners. "Stand down!" one of the renegade troops shouted, raising his weapon. Ramirez held up his hands. "At ease, soldier. We're not here to fight." The rebel lowered his rifle slightly. "Sir, we couldn't just execute them. They're civilians, for Christ's sake." Ramirez's gaze swept over the makeshift camp. Tholian prisoners lay on improvised cots, their crystalline forms cracked and damaged. Human medics moved among them, administering what aid they could. In that moment, something shifted within Ramirez. The weight of their actions, the devastation they'd wrought, came crashing down upon him. "You did the right thing," he said softly. The soldier's eyes widened in surprise. "Sir?" Ramirez squared his shoulders, his voice growing stronger. "I said you did the right thing, and it's time we all did." He activated his comm unit, broadcasting on an open channel to all Alliance forces. "This is Captain Ramirez. I am hereby ordering all personnel to cease hostilities against Tholian survivors. We will no longer participate in the genocide of a sentient species." Protests immediately flooded the channel. Voices of outrage, of fear, of confusion. But Ramirez continued, his words cutting through the chaos. "We came here to defend ourselves, to ensure our survival. But in doing so, we've become the very monsters we sought to defeat. It ends now. We will offer aid and sanctuary to all Tholian civilians. We will work to undo the damage we've caused." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I know some of you will disagree. I know there will be consequences for this decision. But I cannot in good conscience continue down this path of destruction. The choice is yours. Join us in rebuilding, or stand aside." As Ramirez's words echoed across the devastated Tholian worlds, the fragile alliance teetered on the brink of fracture. Some rallied to his call for peace, while others clung to the belief that only total annihilation of the Tholians could ensure humanity's safety. In the refugee camp on Zalkan's moon, Ramirez knelt beside a wounded Tholian. Its crystalline form was cracked and dulled, but its eyes, or what passed for eyes, regarded him with wary intelligence. "I don't know if you can understand me," Ramirez said softly, "but I promise you this. We will find a way forward. Together." As if in response, a faint hum emanated from the Tholian's form. Whether a sign of agreement or simply a quirk of its alien biology, Ramirez couldn't be sure. But in that moment, a fragile spark of hope ignited in his chest. The path ahead would be fraught with challenges. The alliance was splintering, with some factions calling for his arrest and execution. The devastated Tholian worlds would take generations to heal, if they ever could, and the threat of renewed conflict loomed on the horizon. But as Ramirez stood surveying the unlikely gathering of humans and Tholians working side by side, he knew this was their only chance for lasting peace. The real work was just beginning.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.